All right, this is a semi-new venture here for the Steelers Now version of Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, and this is a Steelers Chat. This is a Steelers Chat version of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, coming at you from the Beaver County Auto Studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. And I'm going to take you through... Well, I don't want to say I'll take you through all the drama and the Steelers offseason because that would be a mess and we'd be here for 3 hours. I've already done tons of shows on what's gone on around Steelers Nation. But I'm going to take you through some news and notes recently, as well as maybe what to expect throughout the offseason. We have the NFL draft coming up. There are things that are not all about drama. This is now post-Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then hopefully you guys are going to chime in and get involved here and then answer any questions that you may have here on this live chat version of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So I guess that would make sense then. Let's get a little graphic up there. You can also hit me up on Twitter at MikeOsti11 on Twitter. Makes sense to touch on the topic right now, the topic of the day. It's not necessarily just Steelers, but it could affect the Steelers. They were involved in some controversial calls last season, and it is the latest news. The NFL owners voting on rule changes for the 2019 season, and some new rules coming to be. There's actually now, it was kind of surprising that they voted, they wanted, there was clamoring and beating on the drum and anger from New Orleans, especially of all markets, and Sean Payton kind of got his way, as the controversial no call of pass interference in the NFC Championship game, some calls against the Steelers, say from the Charger game or even the Saints game throughout this season, even calls from the Super Bowl itself now could potentially be reviewed. Because most importantly, from all of this madness, it leaves you with the possibility of pass interference being a reviewable play now. Pass interference, whether it's called or not. So the pass interference that wasn't against the New Orleans Saints, or that wasn't called that would have led to their victory, that wasn't called against the other way, that was not called, now could be reviewed. A no call could be reviewed. So there could be no pass interference, and then now fourth quarter referees get together, like there was at the end of that game, the NFC Championship game, and discuss and huddle up and say that should have been a pass interference, and if there was a PI call on that play, it would have led to the Saints being further throughout the drive, being close to the end zone, and likely be able to drill it home and get that victory. And the Rams would have had the PI against them, and it would have been a clear cut and dry, and we wouldn't have this madness right now. A lot of people are happy about it. Well, guys, I don't mean to start this off on the wrong foot or play the heel card here, but this is just how I've been, and it's really just true. I feel like this is a slippery slope that maybe the NFL is going to regret doing. And right now, these rule changes are just for 1 year, so it's not a guarantee that we see this forever. But as much as there was anger, as much as the Saints did kind of get screwed there, I mean, they did, it's impossible to call or review something after the fact. If there's no PI to come back and say there should have been pass interference, imagine that slippery slope. Imagine how mad fans will be in the anger and the taking to the streets, and imagine those Mardi Gras parades when a team loses a game, whether it be your Steelers or whoever else, because a pass interference originally was not called and then is called after replay. We get a first chatter here in the Steelers chat venture here, and Dan Summerford asking, will the Steelers be on a mission this year? Dan, this is why I titled the show the way I did, and if you go back and look through the docket there, Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live and past shows, you'll see this is kind of what I've been hammering home the last few months, and why back after the Week 17 incident, I immediately then said the Steelers must trade Antonio Brown, and I didn't even want them to try to mend this fence. This is addition by subtraction. I really, really believe that. And I even did a recent show on the Cleveland Browns and their great offseason and how many people out there, many especially in the national media, are crowning them already Super Bowl champion or saying they're the favorite to win the division and they're going to be a playoff team. And this is the most pressure the Browns will ever have since they've been back in the league of the century, really. Certainly with this group, which is still an inexperienced head coach, a quarterback as great as he was on his second year. Odell Beckham Jr. is a great player, but as great as he was, only one postseason appearance and without a victory while he was a Giant. The Ravens are going to be different, but Mark Ingram there, Earl Thomas there might be an upgrade over an older Terrell Suggs, but Lamar Jackson's a question mark at quarterback and then some. I don't believe in him doing it for a full year. If you don't have the quarterback, what do you really have in the NFL these days? The Bengals that are in a new era with a new head coach, without Marvin Lewis finally, but they're a mess down there. No one's going to predict them to do anything. For me, for my money, if I had a gun to my head, I would still bet on the Steelers somehow winning this division. I know they didn't get in the playoffs last year, but something a colleague said the other day I think really speaks volumes. The Steelers now, for the first time, Dan, will be able to actually be focused. The Steelers can be focused on the mission at hand for the first time in years. There's not going to be questions from us before or after games throughout the week about Le'Veon Bell, about will he or will he not show up and which side you're on, because we heard both sides from the offensive line and from the teammates, and we heard that back and forth eventually. There won't be anything from Antonio Brown worrying about arriving in a helicopter, and as fun and entertaining as that was, and I'm not really criticizing that exact thing, but him having to complain that the media is obsessed with him, or anything against Mike Tomlin and certain players, or questions from Tomlin about how he's handling certain players, even going back 2 years ago with the national anthem mess, and Alejandro Villanueva standing in front of the team and having to answer questions about that and closed-door meetings about that. Right now, as we stand here, and we're only in March, mind you, for the 2019 season, it appears they're going to be worse on paper. It does. I mean, you're losing the best receiver in football, future Hall of Famer. It's going to be a second year without Le'Veon Bell, but I have question marks on if James Conner can do it by himself, can handle the load by himself. That's going to be easier said than done, for sure. And he was injured and throughout last season and did have some fumble problems. They're going to be worse on paper. Juju's now going to be double covered. James Washington, Ben believes in. He told us all throughout last season he could step up for sure, but still, on paper, they're going to be worse. No Jesse James, as well as a tight end. Less weapons for Big Ben. But they're going to be able to be focused without having to deal with the drama, without having to deal with taking sides, without having to deal with as much animosity. Maybe it won't be as contentious between us, the media, and the Steelers next season. And it'll be different than the last few years, that the other teams have enough question marks around them, and even though the Steelers still do as well, that, yeah, the Steelers are going to be on a mission to prove Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell wrong, to prove the naysayers wrong. They don't want to miss the playoffs back-to-back years. That's something that Tomlin hasn't done through his career as a Steelers head coach. They don't want that. They underachieved last year, and even despite all the drama, if they would have beat the Browns prior to Baker Mayfield instead of tying them, if they would have held a 16-point lead against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football, if they would have beat the Broncos, a team that was average and still going to be bad, and they should have certainly beat, if they would have flipped 2, 3, 4 games, forget the Saints controversy, if they would have flipped some games against teams that weren't that great, they would have been in the playoffs. It wouldn't even have been the Ravens. So that tells you right there that they would have had a much better shot just off of last year if things were different, even with the drama. And without the drama, it's absolutely going to be a blessing in disguise and can help this team moving forward. And at the very least, Big Ben and Tomlin, I'm sure, are going to secretly be happy to have a drama-free season. Ben's still going to make some jerk-like comments, but it won't be close to what it was last year, and they'll be more focused. Now, Zach, I think you're looking for Pittsburgh hockey now there. Leafs win. A little comment there. Off the Toronto Maple Leafs and the current standings in the NHL, looking towards the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Penguins are very, very tight right there in the division, but they're certainly poised to make a run with that kind of talent. So I'm not going to underrate what they can do, but I'll let Dan touch on that and give you those words of wisdom, or at least so he thinks, for Pittsburgh hockey now and on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Again, while you're here and while those of you who are with us, a few of you certainly are watching right now, and those who are watching and not yet involved, feel free to jump in the Steelers Live chat. Dan's done this most of the Penguin season. We started the Steelers Now site a bit late in the year. A lot of the Steelers coverage of mine was prior to the site. Again, that's SteelersNow.com. And it'll get you a lot of this. We'll do a lot more of these Steeler chats, as we also have the recorded mic drop shows, which do well here on the channel. But once again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go over to SteelersNow.com and hit up all our family of networks, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, even Pittsburgh Soccer Now, and at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. Thomas there, I don't remember Moncrief from the Jags. Yeah, Moncrief, I don't know what I was reading there. It's rough a little bit. I kind of sympathize with Dan trying to have to read down and look at the chat while you're doing a show here. I don't remember Moncrief from the Jazz. Can the Steelers expect much from him in 2019? Well, it's fair you don't remember Moncrief much from the Jags. I might have mispronounced his name, but I do remember him from there and throughout his NFL career. But there's not much to remember, honestly, in terms of him being hurt a lot. He hasn't had a full, healthy season in a while. Certainly not last year. Moncrief's a guy that he's a serviceable wide receiver. You potentially could get 400 to 600 yards out of him, maybe 40 to 60 catches if you're really, really lucky. That's kind of what they felt out of him before. He was never a number one. In no way is he coming in to replace Antonio Brown's production right away. And all of a sudden, Moncrief's going to be part of the Steelers dominating, and they don't need to worry about any receivers because, as you see here, they're still looking and meeting with a lot of wide receivers throughout the combine and potentially drafting a wideout. You can quickly get a wideout to fit in on your NFL roster. We saw Juju's emergence right away. This franchise has replaced all-pro wide receivers before. They've replaced Plesko Burress, who they didn't think they could replace then. They replaced Mike Wallace. They replaced Antonio Holmes despite a Super Bowl MVP. So it can be done. And as you see, the Steelers meeting there, Gary Jennings, David Sills from Iowa Water and WVU. They met with them during the combine. And then Akeem Butler, SteelersNow.com, one of our writers mentioning that Akeem Butler should maybe be a wide receiver option for the Steelers. Again, that would be a great addition. He's more of a guy, unlike Moncrief, that could potentially have that number one potential. He's a beast. He's got it done throughout the college game and put up the numbers. It's, again, about health for him, but he could be a great guy. Juju's going to be the number one. But he's going to see double coverage that he didn't get before that went to AB. It's going to go to him now. Ben believes in James Washington. He told us a lot last season that he really believed in James Washington and thought James Washington could step right in, even despite some comments he made against him throughout the year, just maybe to push him on his radio show. But they're going to draft somebody. I'd be shocked if they don't draft a wide receiver. They need tight end help. I'm seeing that's a question mark here. Who's going to be the number 2 tight end behind McDonald? Vam seems to be injury prone. Yeah, and right now that would be a question mark. I mean, that would be potentially something they could be looking for in the draft or dealing with what they have right now on the roster. But there's nobody on the Steelers that I'm currently saying I'm confident in can replace Jesse James' production. Overall, obviously Antonio Brown is your biggest loss offensive-wise. Yards, touchdowns, 15 touchdowns, 100-plus receptions, 1,200-plus yards last year, and that was without Week 17, and some arguing was a down year. That's how great he was. So it's not going to be easy to replace Antonio Brown. But Jesse James' production might even be tougher. Vance McDonald is hurt constantly. And Jesse James was a great chain mover. He was a local kid from Penn State. Everyone loved him, despite Channing Heath for him often. And that production is going to be difficult to replace, at least position-wise. So that could be where they look in the draft as well. But the Steelers are looking at a wide receiver, and it's not the end of the world. They can replace that position. It'll be tough. It certainly will. I don't want to underplay losing Antonio Brown, but when a guy publicly breaks up with you, when a guy runs you through the coals, disrespects you, eventually you just got to move on no matter what. I mean, he didn't want to be there anymore. It was about money. He got more money elsewhere. He kind of ends up winning that whole little war with the Steelers, unlike Bell, who got a worse deal and ends up with less money, got a little bit more guaranteed, but less overall dollars on a worse team, and loses the 14.5 from last year. So didn't really work out for him, but still, they're out of there. They don't want to be there anymore. The production's going to be hard to replace, but the draft is there. And one benefit of missing the playoffs, not necessarily being bad, but being as bad as they were last year, you have a better positioning. Do you think the Steelers organization has a flaw in being able to evaluate cornerback talent in the draft? Now, that's interesting because we do have the Steelers clearly posturing for that throughout the offseason. I mean, the Steelers bring in Steve Nelson. The Steelers are looking for secondary help. Steve Nelson's a decent signing for sure. He's a guy that kind of been underrated throughout his career, and I think will fit in nicely. Morgan Burnett being gone, so that again hurts the secondary, whether it's a corner or not. And it absolutely appears that I don't want to say Kevin Colbert has an issue with evaluating secondary talent, because it's a tough position to evaluate. It's a talented, athletic position. There's not many elite corners in the NFL. There's not many Richard Shermans, and certainly not Deion Sanders is not walking around these days through the draft. It's a difficult position to deal with. I think sometimes they've taken risks that maybe they shouldn't, or they've waited too long. They like to go with the safe pick early rounds, and they've missed more, you could argue, on linebackers. I know they've absolutely hit on a few, and we know the Shazier injury is not their fault at all, but they've missed more on even other defensive positions, and it's not so much that it's missing in the draft, but it's just they haven't been able to replace what they lost. They never really like to go out and sign free agents. They did with Morgan Burnett. He only was there a year. He wanted to leave, and he's now gone. Steve Nelson is now back, or Steve Nelson is now there. So Steve Nelson basically replacing what they could lose from Morgan Burnett. And it's been there's no denying. It's been a position and been a weakness of the Steelers for at least 2 or 3 years now. Kevin Colbert has absolutely made some questionable decisions in the NFL draft. I don't know if I'd always go in the corner direction, but certainly defensively. And you go into years thinking it would be a weak situation for the Steelers, a weak position for the Steelers. But there have also been times they've played a little above their heads. But again, it's rough with the NFL rule changes. It's rough with the way the game during the Steelers losing a lot of their veteran elder statesmen who were great through the secondary. It's also been a progression of rule changes in the NFL that are really helping the offense. Even look at now the rule changes they open up the show with. You can challenge for pass interference that wasn't even called. You can do that slippery slope and let that genie out of a box, for another analogy, where that's going to be rough on corners. I mean, they're going to think there's no PI. They're going to think they had a great defensive play, and all of a sudden now there's going to be a call against them. Brown, Jones, who do you think will be the next ex-Steeler to sign with the Raiders? I mean, yeah, we're getting a lot of jokes on it's Raiders West out there I'm seeing on Twitter. It's not that much really Raiders West. Landry Jones does not move the needle by any means. He's a backup quarterback. The Steelers fans know more than anybody. He's not going to ever be the guy. He's had some decent spotty starts for Ben, but nobody felt confidence that he would lead them to the promised land whenever Ben did retire and hang it up, which is why they didn't mind seeing him go off the pasture, they thought, and now that maybe is in Oakland or in Vegas if he's still around when they relocate. Antonio Brown's a future Hall of Famer. He's a future Hall of Famer. It's going to be hard to replace him for sure, regardless of what they do in the draft and Juju and anybody else, Moncrief, as a receiver. And he's now with the Raiders. That is unfortunate. They didn't bring in Le'Veon Bell, though. They went after Le'Veon Bell hard. The Derek Carr and Antonio Brown went after Le'Veon Bell hard, and it didn't work, and they didn't bring him in. So it's not too much Raiders West. It would be interesting, though, if you see anybody else go out there. There are some former Steelers that are involved with the Raider contingent right now, which I'm sure they don't mind. John Madden company back in the 70s still won't recognize the Immaculate Reception. You still hear him on broadcast whenever he's around. Refuses to say that ball didn't either hit the ground or hit Freddie Fuqua, and just claiming that the Immaculate Reception shouldn't have been, and ends up being one of the most historical plays in NFL history. Certainly one of the most poignant for the Steeler franchise. There's a statue out there at the airport, but they still argue that shouldn't have been, and that they should have had the dynasty of the 70s. The Steelers kind of interrupted and then had one of their own. So there's a rivalry there. At the very least, it'll revitalize the Raiders-Steelers rivalry. I mean, last year, obviously, the Raiders beat them. It shouldn't have been a loss. That was a Steelers team much better than the Raiders. That was a really bad Raiders team in the midst of that rebuilding year that led them to all these draft picks and being able to make these changes now. They're going to be better. They're going to be a better team. They're going to be entertaining and fun to watch. But to say they're going to be a championship team, or they're going to even be a playoff team, or even contend in their division, a big question mark. And I don't know if I buy that. Still a lot of question marks on their defense. Laney Jones, if he ever sees time, it won't be good for the Raiders, let's just say. And I know people even bringing up that maybe Derek Carr is on the chopping block because of bringing in Landry Jones. I don't see that connected. They don't believe in Landry Jones any more than the Steelers did. It's not like Landry Jones is going to come in if they would trade Derek Carr and be the number one guy and immediately go to the Pro Bowl, and they think that he's going to be pair him with Antonio Brown and whoever else is there, and obviously that would be enough. They may think that. Let me put it this way. That's wrong if they do think that. Landry Jones is not going to give that to you. And I don't imagine now any of those conversations on trading David Carr or getting rid of David Carr and giving up on him. He's had some down years. He's been injury prone, and they've not been as good as they were a few years ago when they were a playoff team. All of that's gone once you bring in Antonio Brown. You bring in Antonio Brown, all the conversation between the two of them and how friendly they are, there's no way you bring him in and you end up then shopping Derek Carr. AB would be upset. That would just make no damn sense. Has the Steelers media gotten rid of the super and the stupid? Well, maybe super in a weird way to us, I guess. Has the Pittsburgh media gotten rid of the stupid end of the year Steelers MVP award? I'm not sure what that question is. Whether or not that's asking if the media got rid of the award for the most friendly player to the media. That award that does exist still, and yeah, some people in the media, some elder people in the media do think a lot about it, do actually put time in and who is that, and you appreciate that player more. But it doesn't, it's not a big deal. Alejandro Villanueva talking to the media, that's great. We love him. Mark, Pouncey and a few others. Cam Hayward is always very friendly with the media. Cam Hayward could have a dynasty with that award in terms of his dealing with the media. Yeah, that award, it's nice to have players who are willing to speak to you. I remember actually covering a Steelers game a couple years ago. This would have been the postseason. They lost the Jaguars in the division round. So throughout that year, and Antonio Brown, after, again, I believe it was after the Patriots loss, was so upset. He couldn't just bring it together to answer any questions. We all swarmed around him, of course, and he wasn't going to say anything. And people have deadlines, and you want to get shows up, and it doesn't help anything. It's not being nice per se. He doesn't owe us anything. But he wasn't really cooperating, and he wouldn't certainly have won that award. So I just kind of get out my phone and kind of record him as he's taking off his shoes and putting a hat on, and by no means am I recording him changing. I don't want to see that at all, and there's many women out there that have. It's another day, though. Look up some YouTube clips on that. That's kind of been touched on through the YouTube wire on Antonio Brown's jaunts through the opposite sex. But I will digress. I didn't want to see that at all, but I just got enough to kind of send the message that, hey, at the very least, I'm going to record you putting your shoes on. I'm going to record you tying your shoelaces. I'm going to record you still with your jersey on. I'm going to record you putting your hat on. I'm going to record you staring at us and kind of being a jerk. And then the message was sent that that's going to be my story. That's going to be my video, if nothing else, and I'll make something of that. And then he kind of cooperated. He pointed and said, oh, you're going to do this. I guess I got to talk. And then he eventually talked. So I don't know if you mean the award there, or you mean, okay, there it is. You're talking about the award, the MVP award that Juju got over AB and Ben this year. So that's the team MVP award. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere either. I mean, every team has that, or most teams have that, whether it's by the media or the fans voting, and the players can get involved. And yeah, the media vote for Hall of Fames. The media vote for these awards. People get annoyed by it, but we are around the team the most. A lot of us do at least know a lot about the team, and there are hidden agendas. I can't deny. There are a lot of times there are agendas of, say, if AB is sorely with you, you may cost him a vote here or there, or may not vote for T.O. didn't get in the Hall of Fame for 3 years because the media didn't like him. That's really the reason. Certainly the numbers said he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. Wasn't the nicest guy in the world, but the media didn't like him. They made him wait and kind of gave him that punishment. So that's still going to exist, though. Yeah, the team MVP is going to exist. And it's funny you bring that up in all the offseason drama, though, because there were reports, and many felt this, that AB, as immature as he's been, and a Hall of Fame receiver, but certainly some immaturity, he was upset about that. I mean, that team MVP went to Juju. It didn't go to Ben. It didn't go to Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown missed the Week 17 game. As great of a year he had with all his numbers, it's not going to be him, certainly, when you have that issue. Granted, it was voted on before, but you have he brings in the double coverage. I think this is what AB wants to see for Juju, and maybe why he was pissed. And this is maybe true. This is true. Not maybe, it is. Antonio Brown got double covered on almost every play. He opened up space for Juju with the double coverage. That's now going to go to Juju. So they both had great years. You could argue Juju had a better year by the numbers, but AB not being there will affect Juju. Now, again, the team MVP award is not the league MVP. This is a team MVP on a team that did not make the playoffs. How big of a deal really should that be? I get you want respect from your peers, but it's not the league MVP. No one's going to remember 20 or 30 years from now, maybe they will in this city, but not anywhere else, on who was the Steelers team MVP in the 2018 season. No one's going to remember that. That's not going to go on your tombstone. That's not going to be part of your resume when you go to the Hall of Fame. Your numbers are there. You helped the team win. A lot of those players did defend AB, even though I could question why. But the locker room was divided. He was a malcontent. He didn't want to be there. It was tons of drama, and it might be addition by subtraction being rid of him, even though he was very, very productive. Now, on the Ben side, it's a little bit more interesting, and I know the national media is kind of running amok with that as well, where, and I'll bring it to you here. Here's an example. First Take, Nick Wright, my man over there. He's one of them, bringing up this Big Ben hornet's nest of a swarm of Big Ben's the problem, where the Steelers aren't going to do anything with Big Ben, and they're going to coddle Big Ben, and there's some who've even made this racial, and just it seems to be running amok with this Big Ben criticism. And then you see players on the Steelers, and there you go, former coaches of Big Ben. There, Bruce Arians, now the head coach of Tampa Bay, and we know the relationship, well-documented love between Bruce Arians and Big Ben, having to stick up for Big Ben and defending Big Ben and saying that he can be a leader and didn't have to be a leader early in his career because of the leaders were already there, and now he's more of a leader, and we saw that from James Conner. Why are we even a conversation? James Conner has said. We heard from other teammates of Big Ben, and Ben kind of laying in the weeds, not really saying much. A lot of that's for sensationalism. A lot of that, Nick Wright and those guys, they're doing it for their shows. They're doing it for ratings. They don't care if it's true or not. Unfortunately, that's where journalism is today, especially in the national media. It doesn't matter to them if it's true or not. It doesn't matter to them if it's backed up. They get the ratings. They get the buzz. They get the views. They get the clicks. So that's really all they care about. Now, from my dealings with Big Ben, yeah, there have been times for sure that he has been too much of a personality, that he has been let his ego run amok. He's been too much of a diva in a way. I don't want to say to the level of Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown by any means, but he's been a little bit of a diva. Even a couple years ago with the whole, will I retire or will I not retire? He liked that. He liked all of us wondering. He liked being the center of attention. Big Ben wants to get credit where it's due. But I also defended him this past season when he was criticizing James Washington, who he has said that he believes in and loves as a guy who can be the number 2 receiver for the Steelers. Then you got to catch this pass when it's thrown, or I'm not going to throw you too many more balls, and you're a rookie, and I'm a champion, and this and that. Ben is the leader of the team. He is the leader of the team. He's the most elder statesman on the team. He is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, which Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown were not. Kevin Colbert loved to rub that in when he could. And, yeah, a quarterback doesn't guarantee to be the leader of the team, but it also makes sense from the Steelers' perspective, because that's, again, what Nick Wright was alluding to there, that whether it's short-sighted or not, as I'm sure he would disagree with it, the Steelers are coddling Big Ben and making him the top priority over these great assets of Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown are great assets. They're incredibly talented players. But Le'Veon Bell played a position with a short shelf life. You're not going to be around forever. After you're 32 years old, people think you're washed up. The Adrian Peterson type of year this past season, and he's going to be around next year with the Redskins. That's an anomaly. Very, very rare. Doesn't happen in today's NFL. You see Todd Gurley be an elite running back, get all the guaranteed money, what Le'Veon wanted, and then get hurt and not be that productive in the postseason. And that led the Rams to a Super Bowl appearance, winning the NFC when C.J. Anderson was able to fill in for him. C.J. Anderson, fresh as a daisy, getting up off his couch, eating some chips, all of a sudden, like a bowling ball for the Rams, leading them through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. They got there without Todd Gurley being elite. It's not necessary. The last 2 champions, the Patriots and the Eagles, they had a committee of running backs. There was the Garrett Blunts and the C.J. Anderson and Gurley, but it's not one guy. You don't have to pay one running back tons of money, and I get why he wanted the guaranteed money. I get that he wanted the protection if he would get hurt or would be bad, that he would still have all this money because he's not going to make money off his rap career. We know that. And he got guaranteed money with the Jets. Congrats. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it would be smart for the Steelers to throw all this guaranteed money or to coddle Le'Veon Bell in particular off the position he plays as a running back of the short shelf life, and the fact that he was injury prone and had the drug problems and was dealing with potential suspensions if he had any further issues with the NFL. And as far as Antonio Brown goes, again, another very, very productive player, a great talent, a future Hall of Famer. He doesn't play running back. He played receiver. You can have that be a longer shelf life. He got his money. He had guaranteed money. He had a decent contract. There's not a team in the world, and people want to point to the Patriots all the time, doing it the best, especially them. But there's not a team in the world that would have ripped up Antonio Brown's contract and gave him a new one out of nowhere when they didn't need to. No way. No way. He had 3 more years left on the deal. There's not a team in the world that would have done that. The Steelers didn't do it. Nobody would have done it. And again, and this is obvious, guys, the quarterback is the most important position. I mean, Big Ben had a little bit of a down year last year, 5,000 plus yards, led the league in passing yards, but they didn't make the playoffs. He threw the most interceptions in the league, so he also led the league in picks and had some games that those interceptions certainly cost them. You could argue the yards maybe overshadowed that, but it was a bit of a down year for Ben. He got to be more efficient than that moving forward. But for his age, pretty high caliber still. Pretty high caliber still. And you want an elite quarterback. You win by having an elite quarterback. The teams that win championships usually have an elite quarterback, or at least a quarterback that can be at that level or close to. When you have an elite quarterback, you hang on him for dear life. You hang on to him for dear life. You're willing to deal with more of the crap from the media, with more of his comments on his radio show, with more of the personality and the diva behavior that does exist with Big Ben. He's not completely innocent in all this, but he's also not 100% of the problem. He's not to be blamed for everything, and it makes sense whether Nick Wright likes it or not, or anybody else likes it or not. It's not a race thing. They gave all this money to Marquise Pouncey to be the highest paid for his position. They paid Antonio Brown all that money in the past. They paid African-American stars in the past. Hines Ward got money. They're not a racist organization by any means. Don't even mention the Rooney Rule and what they've done for race relations in the National Football League. But if the quarterback's elite or a future Hall of Famer still playing at a high level, it doesn't matter whether he's white, brown, green, or purple, you hang on to him, you put up with more than you would from a receiver and certainly a running back. Now that Munch has gone to Denver, who is the Steelers' assistant that you would hate to lose? I mean, again, I want to touch on this Munch going to Denver thing first, though. Mike Munchak goes to Denver, and people acted like the world came to an end. And I did shows on it. It wasn't good. I thought that he would be the one guy that you'd want to keep out of everything, and it would have potentially been a positive thing for the Steelers to still have him around, for sure. But it's not like the world's come to an end. This isn't Vince Lombardi here on the offensive line. The offensive line improved, but it wasn't amazing. It wasn't like he was doing the greatest thing in the world. And yes, they lost some talent, which is part of that. It's not all his fault. But he wanted to be a head coach. Okay, he's been a head coach before. He feels like he had the opportunity. He wanted to go home to Denver. It's the same position. You can be mad on him for that, and it maybe does look bad by the Steelers. I did a show. They had egg on their face from the whole situation. They didn't lock him up when they could. He's a guy you don't want to lose. You let him go to Denver on a lateral move. He doesn't become a head coach there. Many thought that would be the move. If he can become a head coach, of course you go. He doesn't become a head coach. He stayed last year a year longer than he wanted. He's going towards family, and you let him go to Denver for really not more money, not a better job. It's a lateral move. It's a worse team. I mean, that does look bad on the Steelers' part, whether it's their fault or not. But it's also not going to be the end of the world they don't have him. He was a great assistant coach to have, but the Steelers certainly can recuperate without having Mike Munchak. And I don't honestly know if there's any assistant coach that I would have that I would start crying over if you would see leave. I mean, there's Randy Fishner, offensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach. I mean, he's a guy that he's now going to be entering his first season with the Steelers, or entering his second season with the Steelers, actually. And he's a guy that Ben is not going to have the Bruce Arians relationship with anybody ever. And Ben's going to be changing the plays, and Ben's the leader of this team, and Ben's a future Hall of Famer, and he's the guy you protect more than anything. But he's a guy that's been around with the Steelers for a while. So it is a guy that the quarterback likes. It is a guy that you don't have the Todd Haley relationship, as toxic as that was, and clearly Ben didn't like him. They still scored points, and I think Todd Haley got a bit of a bad rap. I mean, he's getting physically assaulted outside Tequila Cowboy. I don't know if that was warranted. But Randy Fishner has been around Big Ben for a while, and Ben seems to like him. You'd want your Hall of Fame elite quarterback to like his quarterback's coach, or now offensive coordinator. Second year, I believe, as offensive coordinator. Been a quarterback coach for 7-8 years prior to that. So you want that relationship to be there. And Big Ben, if he's going to be around for 3 or 4 more years, you don't want to see your quarterback, even if he's being a Hall of Famer, and he is in a decline, he's older, having to continuously change who he's dealing with day to day, having to continuously see a new quarterback's coach or offensive coordinator and get a new relationship. You don't want that position to be moved that often, even though you can see when you have success, obviously that guy usually does get promotions, and he got it within the organization, but it could be elsewhere if the team finally steps up. I mean, I don't know. John Mitchell, he's not going anywhere, though. Longest member of the Steelers coaching staff, 25th season with the team. It's kind of cool to have him there and be that long tenured. And really, in terms of Mike Tomlin, I don't think he's going to be there forever, guys. I think another missed postseason appearance, the heat will continuously turn up on Mike Tomlin, obviously. But he's also a guy that's relatively underrated by a lot of Steeler fans. I mean, you look at Bill Belichick, you look at the era, look at what Mike McCarthy had. He's now gone in Green Bay. But Mike Tomlin's been the second most successful head coach of that same era underneath Bill Belichick, and way underneath, but still. He's won a championship, been to 2, all those playoff appearances, all those victories, 600-plus win percentage, 13 wins a couple seasons ago, even though they lose in the playoffs. And with all that talent, yes, they underachieved, and yes, he might be responsible for allowing the culture to be what it was, and it's not like he's without any blame, but Steelers fans, when they say he should be fired or should be gone, they should part ways, they act like he's done nothing. They act like he hasn't been successful at all. They act like he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, or he's not been wildly successful, and they also forget that if Bill Cowher missed the playoffs several years in a row, oh wait, he did. If Bill Cowher was coaching during the social media age, if Bill Cowher had similar failures, oh wait, he did. He didn't coach during the social media age, but he did lose games he shouldn't lose. He did lose big games. He did underachieve in AFC Championship games and lose to teams that were on paper worse than them. He did miss the playoffs several years in a row. And you guys didn't want him fired then. So Tomlin sometimes gets a bad rap, but I also don't think he's, in terms of coaches and how long they'll be around, it's a little different of an era now without Mike Munchak in Denver, with Joey Porter now gone. You still have you're always going to have the John Mitchells. Randy Fichtner has been a staple there for a while, even though now relatively new as a coordinator. James Daniel, Darryl Drake, some new, some old. These are guys that Mike Tomlin's clearly comfortable with, or else he wouldn't put them on this staff. But it's still kind of a new era for the staff, and there's going to be pressure there with still a lot of talent on this team, and relatively a short window because Ben is older. Try to at least get a playoff appearance, at least get a wild card with that talent and with the landscape of the conference. You flip a few games from last year and they would have been there. So no excuse to not at least get a playoff appearance, regardless of what happens with Cleveland, whether overachieve, underachieve, no matter what. So that coaching staff is going to be under some scrutiny. I would say Randy Fichtner is the answer, though. I would say a guy that's been around that knows your quarterback well, that the offense finally started clicking. You have new offensive players now moving in, whether it be from the draft or however else. You have Antonio Brown and Bell now gone for a second year. You're going to give more continuity to Juju. Maybe this is even more for Juju than Big Ben. You don't want Juju changing his offensive coordinator, even though or the quarterback coach or the receivers are involved in that. 2 great years for Juju. The sky could be the limit, but he's got to deal with more now being double covered. So you don't want that much change on the offensive coaching staff, that after another great year from Juju, you wouldn't love to see success from the offense and have a coach leave, but it is possible. Offensive line coach going to be new, so we'll see how that goes. But you're not going to be excited to lose anything for Ben, because Ben is the guy that's going to be there. Ben is the guy that, regardless of Nick Wright saying this or not, regardless of whether, no matter what anybody feels, yes, he's going to be the most protected guy on the Steelers team. They're going to put up with the most from him. It's not because he's white. It's not because they like him more as a person. It's not because they didn't get to know Antonio Brown's family, and there's a lot of kids to get to know. That's not an easy job. The Raiders better get busy. John Gruden better make some house calls. It's because he's a quarterback. He's an elite quarterback. He's a future Hall of Famer. Every team would. You got to protect your guy. The Patriots done it with Tom Brady for years and years and years. You got to protect your guy. That was Kraft shipping out Garoppolo. That was part of protecting Brady and giving him what he wants. Belichick may not have liked it, but it's all about the quarterback in today's NFL. The Saints are giving all this money to Drew Brees. Yeah, it hurts them elsewhere, but they eventually pick it up with other receivers. They can throw in different weapons. You want to have your elite quarterback be the main staple of your team. He's the guy that's been with you for championships. He's the guy that's going to the Hall of Fame someday wearing your jersey and donning your bust. So, yeah, it's nothing to do with anything else. It's not a racial issue, no matter what they want to say about it, or any former Steelers who got a cup of coffee want to bring up. It's because he's a quarterback who led the league in yards last year. Also interceptions, but he's a future Hall of Fame elite quarterback that, yes, you're going to protect more than anybody else. That's all it was. In the last few years, have you heard of the Steelers allowing any players other than AB to not live in the dorms at St. Vincent's? If not, why make an exception? Can't help make a team. Well, again, I've not heard of any other Steelers not living in the dorms like Antonio Brown. I guarantee you it's happened elsewhere besides him. There are others that could speak on that more. I've been down there. I've certainly been down there, covered the Steelers. And again, that was the focus. Antonio Brown not having to stay with the Steelers at the dorms. And I've even been in those dorms. It's where the media stays. I stayed there for a basketball camp when I was a kid. Those dorms aren't luxurious by any means. The food's not bad, but it's not luxurious there. It's a family atmosphere in terms of being there. It's like you're a college kid, and I'm sure nobody loves it. But Antonio Brown, and this goes back to what I mentioned with Mike Tomlin, it's some legitimate criticism for sure. Antonio Brown was allowed to run amok. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. He didn't have to stay in the dorms at St. Vincent. He showed up in a helicopter. That's funny, but he got out of the helicopter and complained that the media is obsessed with him. When you're the only guy not staying in the dorms, at least the only star, when you show up in a helicopter, when you continuously go on social media and act a fool, when you're throwing water coolers, when you're showing up head coaches, when you're acting like Terrell Owens more than anybody else on the team, and that's a negative of T.O., as a personality, and I get it, the receiver replies on the quarterback and the coordinator and the team to get him the ball or he doesn't get his. But there are many reasons why Antonio Brown ran amok. And Mike Tomlin gave him too much of a loose ship as one of them, for sure. Even years ago, after the Facebook Live, after the playoff game, and before the AFC title game, that wouldn't happen in New England. No way. He let him do whatever he wanted. He even has said, he said this in press conferences. The clip is probably on Pittsburgh Sports Live, because I got all the clips from this past season, and Tomlin reiterated some of this on what he's told AB and others throughout past years. And this has been 2 or 3 years brewing now, and it's not just CTE. I mean, there could be some that said it's a mental thing, and the hit on Burfict, maybe future, now current teammate of his, future best friend, I guess. Maybe they're going to have a documentary. They should be an HBO Hard Knocks, the Raiders now. If it can't be the Browns, because they just were, give it to the Raiders, AB Burfict, that's where it's at. Some point there, I mean, it certainly couldn't help, but AB's just that way. So that was part of Mike Tomlin letting him do whatever he wanted. He has said publicly to us that he allows players, if your production outweighs your problems, I'll put up with it, to paraphrase. Antonio Brown's production always outweighed his problems. There were problems of throwing furniture off a balcony, almost killing a toddler. There were problems with the Facebook Live. There's kind of problems with not staying with the team. There's problems with then quitting on the team in week 17. There's problems when you disrespect the team and you disrespect the owner and you won't return the owner's phone call or the quarterback's phone call. That's a problem, but the production usually outweighed those problems until recently, until he quit on the team in week 17. I wouldn't care as much about where he stays at St. Vincent. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't. I mean, Brett Favre showed up late for training camp many years, and he got older. Same thing with Michael Strahan. A lot of older players do that. So at least Antonio Brown was there. He didn't show up late. He didn't hold out a year like Le'Veon Bell, for example, which was different. He was on the tag, but still. He was there. He was showing up and was productive when needed, but he was out of the door. Okay. I mean, no one wants to stay there. Sometimes Jimmy Johnson said this best during the Cowboys dynasty of the early 90s. Sometimes you have to do what Mike Tomlin said. Sometimes that he made the comment of, remember him in one of those NFL Films clips, that if Troy Aikman fell asleep in a meeting, I'd whisper in his ear, hey, Troy, get up. If somebody else fell asleep in a meeting, I'd fire them and cut them to be an example for everybody else. Well, when you're a Hall of Fame player, when you're Antonio Brown or Big Ben, especially Big Ben as a quarterback like Troy Aikman was then, but even as AB is a Hall of Fame player, you're going to have some rope. So I get them giving him some rope. They let him have way too much of it. I get them giving Ben more rope as the quarterback, but again, they let AB get way too much of it because they underestimated his personality. They underestimated what Jeff Reed or Emmanuel Sanders or Ryan Clark has said about him. For you to believe that it's just CTE, for you to believe that this is just out of nowhere Antonio Brown being the victim and it just brewed a few months ago and any of that he tries to sell and slurp that Kool-Aid, you're clueless, and you're basically calling Ryan Clark, Emmanuel Sanders, Jeff Reed. Jeff Reed told me this on my Trib show last year. He told it to me. The other ones went and said it to the national media. You're calling them all liars. You'd be calling them liars. Because all of them said that even when AB was younger and wasn't a star, he had moments where they believed he was a personality. He had moments where they believed his ego would get out of control if he was ever paid. And maybe Juju is defending Ben because he hasn't got paid yet. Maybe. But once AB got paid, they all said he was going to be a loose cannon. He was going to be someone you had to walk on eggshells with. It was going to be a problem eventually. There was a shelf life on this personality. It sucks they didn't win a championship during that shelf life with all the production. Partly him, partly everybody else. But you also got to look in the mirror, and it's AB's fault, and he's ridiculous, and I'm sure the similar problems will be out there in Oakland. There's really no defending how he carried himself, even if you believe some of his siding in terms of the money or whatever. Okay, you want to believe that? Fine. I'm not going to hate on the guy for getting the money he wants and believing what his value is. But he didn't handle himself in any sense of professionalism, and it's not surprising. So I don't care about staying in a dorm or not staying in a dorm at St. Vincent if the team doesn't care. The teammates don't care. They care about quitting on them in Week 17, not getting an MRI and not playing in that game that they needed to win to make the playoffs. I don't really care too much about St. Vincent. That didn't become a problem, really. The team, no one cared about that, even though he was the only guy really doing that, or at least the only star that I was aware of. But they care more about everything else, the totality of everything else. And then it just became too much. I mean, they just had to trade him. It just became more trouble than he was worth. Going to round things out here unless I get anybody else in the chat. We got some chatters here. Pleasantly surprised. Steelers now a relatively new venture. Started it towards the end of the season. Clearly now it was helped out by all the drama of the Steelers offseason of going towards the NFL draft and then training camp, and then next year it's going to be very interesting now with no AB, no Bell. I mean, it's going to be a new era of Steeler football. No Mike Munchak that we mentioned earlier. Some big changes trying to replace AB for sure. It'll be possible, though. Either James Washington steps up, Juju has to do more while double covered. Moncrief, maybe if healthy, could do more than he's done in the past. Played well, though, when healthy in his career with the Colts and with the Jaguars. And another year of Connor. If Connor can stay healthy and tote the rock for a full year and not fumble the football. He over-exceeded my expectations. I lost the bet because of that with my buddy on the fan, Doran Dickerson, and former Pitt All-American. He got his 8 TDs that I didn't believe in, but still, it'll really be interesting if he can keep that up throughout an entire year and take better care of the football. That'll be big. I would not be against at all drafting or getting a running back like a D'Angelo Williams, a veteran, to plug in and help him out. To be a secondary back. That's how the championship teams have won. It's not been one guy. It's been the Eagles, the Rams, the Patriots. A committee of running backs, or at least come playoff time, a committee of running backs when you plug in C.J. Anderson when Todd Gurley got hurt and started floundering. He wasn't even playing well down the stretch when healthy. It was C.J. Anderson carrying that Rams team on the ground. The Steelers are going to need more than James Conner because of his health issues. So if they can get another guy, a D'Angelo Williams type, That would be big for the Steelers, as well as replacing the tight end, the question mark on Vance McDonald, and then whoever's going to be the number 2, if Juju can handle the double coverage. A lot of question marks there, but still a very winnable division. I don't totally believe in the Browns yet. I don't want to crown them just yet. And honestly, guys, as again, we're going to round this out as we're getting here almost at 50 minutes of this show, but I was happy to do it because of all the activity here. Shorter shows absolutely do better on the channel, but you guys are going to chat. I'm going to talk to you. You're the ones paying for these lights, as well as Beaver County Auto, and helping us keep this thing moving within the whole Pittsburgh Sports Now family, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, and now SteelersNow.com as part of the Pittsburgh Sports Live venture here in the YouTube channel. So any of you enjoyed this, make sure to click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure to click subscribe right there. There's the button. Hopefully you got a lot of this live feed and the video stayed, though, because that was making me nervous on the laptop, on the tablet. This might have just been a podcast. I don't know. It looked like the freeze frame was on for a bit too much, and we kind of went off and on the stream strength. But either way, hopefully you got your answers. I like the conversation. We went back and forth. There were people here chatting, so I can't hate on that as long as there's going to be chatters. I know Dan gets activity, but he's been doing this a while, so we'll keep it moving and see if we can keep up with chats like this. Thomas, you've been one of the most prevalent chatters, so I'll give you another answer here. How often will you be doing this show? Well, Thomas, I will tell you. I don't know. I mean, I've got a lot of views, so I don't know if you're new or what. But Mic Drop, the show that I host here as part of my coverage with Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm also responsible for most of the Steelers coverage here, the Tomlin videos, etc. on Pittsburgh Sports Live. At least weekly, at least once a week, depending on my schedule. I've done that twice a week, often. So depending on the news, depending on the interest, depending on how well it's doing, and depending on sponsors like Beaver County Auto, at least once a week for sure. I guarantee at least once a week, maybe twice a week. There are weeks that I've done twice a week, especially now with SteelersNow.com and moving over the shows there. So any of these shows here, they're on the Mic Drop section of the Pittsburgh Sports Live channel here on YouTube. They're also, most of them, because they mostly are Steelers-centered. There have been some Pirate shows. Did a show after Kutch signed with Philadelphia on the Pittsburgh-Philadelphia rivalry. Did some shows on Pitt. Did some even shows on WVU. Did some shows, even a couple actually on the Penguins way back. Did a Penguins season preview with Josh Yohe of The Athletic way back, and maybe blend those in and maybe blend guests in as well, depending on how things go here. But at least weekly, if not multiple shows throughout the week. Not every day. Schedule can't command to have that happen. But as the Steelers news moves, at least weekly, if not multiple, throughout the week. But they can be found here in the Pittsburgh Sports Live YouTube channel. Click subscribe, and you'll get notifications whenever we do any shows or put up any content at all, whether it be covered from games, whether it be press conferences, whether it be any of these shows, live chats, or just talk shows in general. We've got a Pirates one popping up here today as well, and Corner 3 to get some March Madness love as we give you more basketball talk than most outlets here in the Pittsburgh market. Even touching on the NBA. I've been on that show a few times as well. Cale Berger does a great job. Current college student, so a bright future here, hopefully in this market in media, but wherever his career takes him. You can also find it at pghsportslive.com on the website for all this content to live archived there. And these shows, the Steelers Now versions of Mic Drop, which are most of my shows these days, SteelersNow.com. So this show, all the shows, they're also end up SteelersNow.com after the broadcast here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Chats like this, though, to answer that question as part of it. Chats like this, I don't know. It'll depending on the success of this, depending on how many of you guys are there, depending on how much you want the chats. And tell me if you do. Tell me at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter, or let us know at PGH Sports Live on Twitter or at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. Follow all those spots and let us know if you want more of these Steeler chats. If you guys keep engaging, I'll try to make more of these lives. It depends on the news, depending on the sponsors, again, depending on my schedule, like the regular show. I will say I'm going to still at least do a mic drop that's recorded at least once a week, maybe mix in these lives as well, and maybe make that live depending on how much interest there is. So that's a question mark. Maybe you guys can answer the question, but at least once a week with these talk shows during the off season, combine coverage. Alan Saunders was out there in Indianapolis. We even had Will Greer videos. A lot of those did really, really well. NFL draft covered for sure. We're finally now moving into only 50% drama coverage because it's a lot more just the national media fanning the flyer with Big Ben. But AB is gone. Bell's gone still. So maybe a little less drama. But if you like the drama, if you like the car crash, those shows are archived to Pittsburgh Sports Live YouTube channel, as well as those websites. And last question here, because I saw it before I was about to shut off. The media is blowing this Ben stuff way out of proportion. I think Ben is a leader, and other quarterbacks act the same way, and they don't say nothing. Dan, that's a great way to end this note because I couldn't agree more. And I'm not a Ben, I'm not a Ben defender. I'm not going to live and die by Ben. It's not like I'll defend Ben no matter what. There's plenty to criticize him on throughout his career. I'm not even going to touch on the rape investigations, and he was never, found guilty of those, but certainly stupidity at the very least, and signing yourself in a college bathroom and a guy guarding the door. Ben's been stupid, certainly at times, very young and immature back then. And Ben does say some things, and it's even more prevalent now, as he's a veteran, a Hall of Famer, and knows his legacy in the NFL is secure regardless. He's going to Canton. That you listen to his radio show on The Fan, you listen to anytime Ben is talking anywhere, and it's not on Twitter because that's not him. That's somebody he pays to run his account that blocks many of us, or in media or fans. You're probably blocked as well. I am blocked by the Ben account. Not as fun as being blocked by the AB account, though, but I will say that... I thought I had... Never mind. I thought I had another tweet there about that, but I guess I don't. Anyway, AB blocks me. Oh, well. And there was somebody's tweet I thought I took a screenshot of in terms of, see, fans, just unfollow the guy. If you don't want to hear it, if you don't want to have this seep into your brain, if you don't want to be immersed with it anymore, he's gone. So just unfollow him. I had the decision made for me, though. That's fine. Yeah. The national media absolutely did fan this flame, for sure. I mean, again, I said it earlier. They can click back and watch again. They have no proof on any of this. Some of them are tapped in, but they're not in the facility. I don't see them there every week. I don't see them there on Sundays. I don't see them there on Tuesdays before the press conferences. I don't see them there on Thursdays. I don't see them there talking to players. You get Aditi who is great at what she does, and she works for NFL Network, so she gives you more of the national spin, sometimes gets you into this vein. And she's more than a local beat writer, so she gives you more than maybe the rest of us would do. That's about it. There's nobody else nationally there. They don't hear things. So they're saying things just for ratings, just for clicks. That's all they care about. Or they have an agenda off race and just trying to make this a race issue that it's not. I got to take everything at face value from what I've heard and from what the players are saying. James Conner, Marquise Pouncey, Cam Hayward, Ryan Clark. I mean, Ryan Clark kind of laughed, and Ben's a fine leader. He's just as good of a leader as many other elite quarterbacks. He's just as fine. When you bring up other quarterbacks that don't say nothing, Aaron Rodgers is one. Maybe that's who you're thinking of, because that's who I think of. Aaron Rodgers, this was what I loved when they had rumors of AB going to Green Bay, maybe. Aaron Rodgers is a future Hall of Fame quarterback, for sure. He's one of the best ever, for sure. Maybe even better than Ben historically. Okay, for sure. But he's also just as much of a personality. He's just as much of an egomaniac, and he does the same thing on his radio show that Ben does on his. Tom Brady does the same thing when he goes in WEEI. He goes back and forth with them and talks about other people, talks about teammates, doesn't care. But Ben's not afraid to say what he wants to say. He's not afraid to speak his mind. He's not afraid to say anything, really. Now a little bit of a I don't give a you-know-what era for Big Ben, because he knows he's an elite quarterback. He knows he's a Hall of Famer, and that's why you're going to protect him more as an elite quarterback or Hall of Famer. So they're going to be putting up with more because he is who he is and because he's a quarterback. But Aaron Rodgers does the same thing, and the national media doesn't focus on that. Aaron Rodgers rips teammates. Greg Jennings has gone on national TV on Fox and said that Aaron Rodgers ripped him a new one when he left, and he thought that was unfair. Aaron Rodgers worrying about his money when Aaron Rodgers already got paid, and Aaron Rodgers got his big contract now and is wanting other players there and criticizing them when they don't step up, but all the money is going to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has said the same type of dick comments to the media. He's thrown teammates under the bus. Brett Favre did it prior to him in Green Bay. It's happened with Hall of Fame quarterbacks through the test of time. Troy Aikman, Terry Bradshaw did it. For any of you older fans back in the 70s, it happens. Elite Hall of Fame quarterbacks, especially those who win championships, feel like they can walk on water with their franchise and say anything they want. And they really can, especially in today's NFL. But they aren't afraid to criticize players. They sometimes throw teammates under the bus. And do you hear the national media jump on Aaron Rodgers when he throws teammates under the bus? Or acts like a jerk, or goes maybe too far to the media against the locker room code? No, they leave him alone. You hear that he's a bad man. You hear all them praising him. Same thing. I kind of get what you're saying there, Dan. I get it. That, yeah, Ben's a Hall of Famer just like them. He criticizes his teammates. He's a little sorely with the media. He has an ego. He wants everyone to like him. Maybe those things will turn you and rub you off the wrong way. He's still the best, he's one of the best on the team. He's a team leader, and they're going to protect him. He's a quarterback. But many other are the same way, and the national media leaves them alone. This is a race issue. This is an agenda by many of the woke media in defense of AB and Le'Veon Bell. This is tried to make them into victims when they weren't, and it's completely and totally asinine. That'll do it for me there, 1 full hour running a marathon. That's a lot of talk. I've done longer shows, but either had a co-host or had a guest, and I appreciate the chats, though, and the activity. So we get that. I'll keep on moving with this. And I do apologize if this was just pretty much a pure podcast. I threw some videos up there for some visual, some images. But this should have been a video. This is Pittsburgh Sports Live. We do videos here on a YouTube channel. It's where we make our big bucks. And it looked like, yeah, the screen did freeze for a lot of this. I don't know if that happened through most of the conversation, but you could still hear me, and you were still engaging and asking questions while I was being heard. So it's better than nothing, I guess. But want to make sure you follow Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, SteelersNow.com, our new venture here. And, of course, maybe you can at least see this if you can't watch it. Click subscribe on the YouTube channel. Click subscribe there. Click on the subscribe button. My finger is now pointing at it. If you can't see that, though, that's what I'm doing. Finger is pointing at this graphic. And there's going to be pressure, as somebody asked earlier. There's going to be a lot more pressure, but maybe more focus, as I truly believe there was a lot of addition by subtraction for the Pittsburgh Steelers during this offseason.